paranormal that cannot be explained by scientific methods.
Told of a creature that was 6.5 to 7 feet tall.
The CIA ran secret mind control experiments.
It's a tale of a creature that's been seen by many, but believed by few.
And experts say there have been reported sightings of paranormal activity.
And there was this creature, and it ran down this hill.
They say something was flying over their house, and they have no idea what it was.
How the world's most powerful individuals are actually shape-shifting reptilians.
My scariest ghost hunting experience.
Jason and JV.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth.
You can't handle the truth. Can't handle the truth.
Who would it now?
Beyond reality radio.
Welcome to the world of the unusual, the bizarre, and occasionally the macabre. This is Beyond Reality Radio. Jason and JV have the night off. My name is Bruce Markison. Glad to be filling in over the next couple of hours, and we'll have a chance to talk about a fascinating topic. Tonight we are going to talk about the Men in Black, secret government agency. We'll be talking about a gentleman, or with a gentleman named Jason Brown. Claims that he worked for the Men in Black. He'll discuss the training involved with that, time travel, lots of interesting stuff coming up. Jason Brown, his experiences with the Men in Black. We welcome you to the program. A late night Wednesday, early Thursday morning. There are many ways that you can follow us, Beyond Reality Radio. We have a website, www.beyondrealityradio.com. If you go to the website, we have a chat room. We'd love you to participate in the chat. You can do that during the course of the next couple of hours. We also have a Facebook page at Beyond Reality Radio. You can follow us on Snapchat and Instagram. And if you'd like to learn more about me, I have a Facebook page. I talk a lot about horror, sci-fi, pop culture, that sort of stuff. I'm on Facebook, Bruce Markison. That's Markusen. And I'm on Facebook. Send me a friend request if you'd like. And read some of my posts about horror, sci-fi, and pop culture. Want to remind you about some of the programs that we have coming up over the next several nights. Tomorrow night, Thursday, our special guest is going to be Todd Standing, Sasquatch researcher. The discussion will be on his research on Bigfoot, a phenomenon that has always interested me. Jason and JV will be talking to Todd. That's on the Thursday night show. On Monday, the guest will be writer Lee Austin. He'll be talking about his book, Morning Star's Tale, Why the Flat Earth Topic is So Controversial, and also how the occult and the Book of Enoch confirm many of the theories in his book. Then on Tuesday night, the guest will be Rob Shelsky, ufologist, paranormal expert. We'll be talking about his latest book, Shattered Reality, The Mandela Effect. Also, he'll talk about what he is currently working on, talk about topics like life after death, consciousness, quantum immortality, and so much more. So those are some of the programs coming up later this week and early next week right here on Beyond Reality Radio. Again, Jason and JV have the night off. Bruce Markison glad to be filling in over the next 2 hours. Our special guest will be Jason Brown talking about his experiences with Men in Black. A little bit later on, we'll take your calls for Jason. We do have a toll-free listener line. It is 844-687-7669. Once again, that number, 844-687-7669. We will take your calls later on in the program for our guest, Jason Brown. It's all coming up on a late Wednesday night edition of Beyond Reality Radio. Stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio, late night Wednesday. Jason and JV have the night off. Bruce Markson, glad to be with you. And we'll be joined over the next couple of hours by our guest tonight. His name is Jason Brown. He's going to be telling about his experiences in the agency Men in Black, his work, time travel, UFOs, all sorts of interesting stuff coming up. We welcome Jason Brown to the program. Jason, hi, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
We're going to talk about this from start to finish. And for those who are not familiar with this term, Men in Black, we're not talking about the movie. We're talking about real men in black. So let's begin very basically right there. When we're talking about Men in Black, what are we talking about exactly?
The Men in Black, they're basically a 3-letter agency that started out shortly after the Roswell crash, which was back in 1947. And basically our job was my personal experience wasn't necessarily that much to do with the aliens and the extraterrestrials. However, a lot of the things that people out there think that were, UFO crashes and whatnot like that, actually had to do with accidents involving time machines.
So this goes back a number of years.
Yeah.
What was the specific year of Roswell?
That would be 1947.
Okay, so we're talking late 40s. When did you become involved?
Okay, well, during my participation, they would start out like basically before you were even born. So I've been involved in this like my entire life. And the way you're recruited is the government, United States government, they had been tracing ancestry going way, way back. They looked in everything, including the Mormon genealogical library. And what they were looking for was people who came from certain bloodlines. And they were looking for, like, say, descendants of the Spartans, for example, or like Vikings, or say, like some of the clans from Scotland. And in my particular history, on my father's side, was one of the clans of Scotland that helped with the Battle of Hastings in 1066. And in addition to that, on both sides of my family, there was both engineers and military. The grandfathers on both sides of my military grandfathers on both sides of my family were in the military. My grandfather on my father's side was a paratrooper during World War II. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what my grandfather on my mom's side did, but after he left the military, he was, excuse me, he was working on classified projects with Aerojet. And back to my father's side, I had another uncle. He was another engineer. He actually worked at Area 51 too. So, but that's about as far as it goes. There was no military on my either one of my parents. It was just like grandparents and stuff like that. And so what they were looking for was by tracing this ancestry, is that they theorized that having this conflict in your history, in your family history, it passes down genetic memory, so that you would basically be more inclined to survive in a hostile situation, basically. So they figured that these people, they also had, good eyesight, good hearing, they're, intelligent, and they knew how to take care of themselves in this kind of deal. So that's how it starts before you're even born, basically. Now, once you are born, the training begins before you can even walk. And basically what happened was some of my other colleagues, there was a lot of time travel involved in this, by the way. they would come back, and what would happen is they would do things like they would play like board games with you, but the board games would be for something. It would be for like children that were older, right? But you were playing it at a younger age, and it would kind of start to engage your brain and help develop it further for on a higher level than you should be when you're that young.
When you say board games, what kind of games are you talking about?
Well, the one thing I remember I can tell you right offhand was something like Connect 4.
Okay.
It was just real simple. Like they wanted you to develop.
You still there, Jason? We lost you momentarily.
Can you hear me?
Yep. We lost you for just a second, but I think you're back. Go right ahead.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, not your fault.
I got a lot of technical difficulties lately. I guess somebody doesn't want me talking. Okay, but what happens is while you're playing these games, they would watch you. And as they were watching you, they would take note of how well you would either play by the rules or try to cheat or like improvise, basically. And they were studying you. They're watching how you would do it. And this went on for a while until you're of the age to where you're able to, actually start walking. And once you're able to finally walk, that's when the combat training begins. And you're trained in armed and unarmed combat, basically. And you learn weapons, guns and all that. And you start sparring. And when you spar, the age, gender, and weight class didn't matter. So basically, you could be this tiny little tyke, and you spar with an adult, but they weren't going full on with you or anything like that. But you would gain experience from taking on someone bigger and stronger than you, basically. So following this, when you started school, you would actually sort of live a double life. You were attending two schools during this, and you had two separate identities while you were attending a regular school and this other advanced school. And in this other advanced school, you're taking things like art, music, chess, mathematics, geometry, history. You would study the like how the time stuff works and the equipment, what you go out and be doing, that kind of thing. And some.
Where was this school located?
That's classified.
Okay.
So sometimes when I say that, it means that it was classified even for me.
Yeah.
Because what happens is they didn't always tell us a whole lot. When we went out, we kind of didn't know when we were, and like say if you traveled to time or something like that, they wouldn't tell you when you were, but you kind of have to look around and see how people looked, to see how the area looked, that kind of thing, and then kind of deduce it on your own, basically. So a lot of this other stuff, little details here and there, is it's kept even from us. And another thing about this is in the MIB, they're practicing memory compartmentalization. And what this means is going back to things like the MK Ultra type stuff, where they would induce amnesia in people through traumatization or whatever, drugs even. So because the equipment and technology that
Still there, Jason?
So the entire Earth. Yeah. Hello?
Oh, we lost you momentarily again.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
You want to switch to landline or something?
No, we'll keep going. We'll give it a try.
Okay. So they're practicing the memory compartmentalization because the time travel equipment is extremely dangerous. It's literally the most dangerous thing out there. It's more dangerous than nuclear weapons, basically. So in addition to not telling us things, they were also wiping our memory whenever we were doing this kind of stuff. And what they would do is they had a machine, and it had electrode leads that came off of it, And on the ends of these leads, there were what looked like ECG pads, and they would stick them on your body, and there's two of them. And what they would do is they would shock you, and that shock would compartmentalize about the last 24 hours of your memory. And so before they did this, they would have you sit in a room for about an hour, and then you would go off and you would do, whatever mission you were doing, and then you would come back and get the shock. And after you got the shock, it would seem as if that you had never even left the room, because you wouldn't even remember that you left, and you wouldn't even remember the shock for that matter.
So when all this training is going on, you're what, under 10 years old? I mean, you're a very young child.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, like, we're talking like 5 years old, and for my whole life, about 5 years old was when I actually started going out. And see, the idea with starting the training so young is that like Tiger Woods, he started golfing when he was like a young age, and all of a sudden he's a great golfer or whatever. Well, what happens is when you start young like that, you can build up a surprisingly high level of competence and skill level at a young age. So by the time that you're like, older, you can actually outperform other people versus somebody who was 18 and joined the military and had only like 1 or 2 years of training.
So you weren't overwhelmed by this?
No, not at all. It wasn't that. I mean, there were times like when we were training and stuff, like, I don't really want to do this, but the kind of people that they were seeking out were of strong mental resilience. And during all of this, they were also exposing us to a lot of experiences and stuff. So it wasn't like, so things weren't so overwhelming when you're actually like, out in the field. And I mean, we were doing all kinds of stuff. Like some of the training they had us doing, they were having us, one of the things involved having us follow animals out in the wilderness. And we're talking like out in the jungles and the woods. There's wolves and jaguars and stuff like that. I mean, they were conditioned not to attack people, but they were pretty much wild. And you'd be sent out, and you would watch these animals and observe them and report back to about what you learned about it. And the idea with that was that wild animals, they're efficient when they're out in the wild, and if you act inefficiently, then you die.
Jason, we're going to have to stop you right there. We have a hard break coming up at the bottom of the hour, but stay with us. We're going to continue with Jason Brown talking about his experiences with the Men in Black. Stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. You are listening to Beyond Reality Radio on a late night Wednesday. Bruce Markison filling in for Jason and JV. They both have the night off. Our guest is Jason Brown, a man who claims that he has worked for the Men in Black. We're talking about his training, his experiences with the MIB on the whole concept of time travel, which, as he has already pointed out, quite a dangerous concept in many ways. We are continuing with Jason Brown on tonight's program. Jason, before the break, we were talking about the training and some of the difficulties that you faced having to actually go out in the wilderness, have experiences with wildlife, animals. For how many years did this training go on? And at what point were you finally deemed ready to be an agent?
Well, the training with the beginning of the training, it carried on until I was probably just before I was a teenager. And but for actually going out on the field, I was going out on the field actually at a pretty young age. It was as if the training had continued on, and you would progress and do different things as you got older and had more training. And I mean, the idea was this hardcore training was, they emphasized that they wanted us to be ready for threats known and unknown. So meaning things that they hadn't even thought about yet. And so, I mean, some of this stuff, it included, they were putting us in like a tub of cold water, and then they would have you sit in it for longer and longer periods of time, eventually they would add like bags of ice to it. And I mean, a couple of times I had to be chipped out of the freaking thing because it was just like they left me in there for so long.
Doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
No. It wasn't fun.
Yeah.
And while I was sitting in there, like another one of my colleagues would be next to me, and she would give you encouragement, just hang on a little longer, just hang on a little longer, and they would kind of keep you going. And they were doing they would do cold resistance, they would do hot resistance. The other thing was they would desensitize us to fear. And one of the things they did with the fear desensitization was that they would actually stick us in a tank full of water with no air pocket and a lid over it, and they would drown us over and over repeatedly until it removed the fear of drowning. And they would revive you, and then you'd go back and do it again. And some of the times they would have you train with like underwater sparring. I don't know how to call it, but they would have another guy in there with you, and they would encourage you to fight back against him while you were in this tank and stuff like that, so that you would gain experience in case you were, having to tangle with somebody while you're in the water.
Yeah.
And then they would desensitize us to heights. They would have us walk across boards across tall buildings, and they would shrink. The boards would get narrower and narrower each time you did it again and again.
Mm.
And from that, it progressed to jumping out of a plane without a parachute, and somebody would follow behind you. And I mean, it got even crazier than that, to the point where they would have you hanging onto the outside of the aircraft from takeoff up to altitude, and then jump off.
Yeah. So if you had any phobias to begin with, this training would essentially eliminate those phobias.
Oh, most certainly, because as I was saying, they wanted you ready for anything. I mean, it could be, some kind of completely unrecognizable alien, or who knows what could come from some other kind of dimension, like just stuff they didn't even know about.
Yeah.
They had us handling snakes, insects, and spiders. They were even having us eat them. They were having us eat cow and pig guts and stuff like that, and they would for that they wanted to remove the squeamishness from us. I mean, who knows, as I said, who knows what kind of alien you would come across. It might gross somebody out, and it had a dual purpose for that, because they wanted us to remove the squeamishness in case of a survival situation, so that in case we had a limited amount of something to eat, you might have to only eat like raw food or something like that, raw meat, so that it was for the survival. And then they would have us, they stuck us in something that was like a diving chamber, and they would increase the pressure on it, and they would also have decrease the pressure so that you could get used to just pressure all over the body, or the lack of it. And then the last thing they did, it was desensitization to pain. And this is where it got crazy, because they would hook you up to some kind of machine. I mean, I don't know the technical details of the thing, but it would stimulate the pain receptors all over your body at once. But what they would do was they would keep it low enough so that you didn't completely black out from it yet. And you would sit in there, and you would feel the pain all over your body all at once. And the idea with that was they wanted to remove the involuntary recoil from pain stimuli, such as getting struck by a pressure point or getting stabbed or shot. So you would be, in case that happened, you would be able to keep going and basically be running on adrenaline alone. And from that point, there was VR training too, and this was from.
This is virtual reality?
Yes, virtual reality. This took place throughout, and the equipment that we started with was the same equipment that the U.S. Army was using in what was called their Force 21 project. And what it was is basically like simulations. You would have like a simulated rifle, and you would shoot at simulated targets, and I mean, the graphics were pretty crappy back then. It looked like it reminded me of the GoldenEye game from Nintendo 64. It was just these crappy 3D graphics, but apparently it was supposedly like a fairly realistic simulation. So, you know, then they had, uh, I don't know what to call it. It was like a holodeck from Star Trek. I mean, it had like 3D hologram area that you can move around, and they could project full size 3D simulations of people. And I mean, it was better graphics, but it wasn't so realistic that you couldn't tell it wasn't real. And what they would have you doing with this is you would practice your sneaking around, basically, like sneaking into buildings, sneaking around people, trying not to get found.
Right.
And what they would do is they would ramp up the sensitivity of their sight and the sound of the simulated people in there, so that you would kind of basically have to up your game, so that once you were able to successfully complete the enhanced simulation, normal people in regular life would be like nothing. I mean, it would just be a piece of cake. And
Yeah.
you know, I suspect this pictures or files taken out of their house or something to that effect, and just not seeing a trace of what happened, and you know, just in and out or something like that, or you know, escaping from custody.
Yeah. Jason, did at any point you just say, I can't do this anymore, I want out? And was there an option for you to just leave this program?
Well, there was a couple instances of this. In fact, the first time I was a little kid, we started our weapons training, and I was just like, I don't want to do this. I mean, I was a little kid. I started crying, but one of the other MIB, he came up, and he was just talking to me, and he was like, you know, he just had this way of saying things to you and just saying the right thing, and he would just be like, he just said, the first bullet you shoot will be better than the last bullet you shot today, and you'll still keep getting better and better, even if you're not trying that hard. And he was just like, do you love your mom? Don't you want to protect her from bad guys? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this guy that was talking to me, he was just like, a lot of people looked up to him, and I just thought he was so cool, and I was just like, yeah, I want to keep going. And there was other instances where I don't remember this, but I saw video footage of it. It was eyes only. I just got like frustrated from the tediousness of it and how stupid people were acting or something like that. But other than that, as far as like if I actually like put my foot down and said no, I don't want to do it, I can't say that I have that information. I just don't know.
Yeah, they might have said no. You got to keep going.
It's likely, and
Yeah.
with the memory compartmentalization that they do, they might still be bringing you out and then just wipe your memory of the whole thing, just like they've already been doing. So it's like, even if you wanted to tap out, you just might not even remember that you wanted to later.
Yeah.
So that they would just keep coming and get you, and you'd keep going out, and you wouldn't even remember that you had wanted out at that point.
Yeah. Our guest is Jason Brown, talking about his experiences working for the secretive government agency, MIB, Men in Black. Very rigorous, very difficult training involved. We're going to talk a little more about that, also about some of the time travel experiences that Jason has had. I want to mention your website, Jason. It is theneoilluminati.com. And you also have a Facebook page. So if you go to facebook.com and then type in the Neo Illuminati Official, you can learn more about Jason's experiences and also communicate with him through those particular sites. So you've gone through all this training. Was there finally a point in time where they said, okay, now you're ready to go out into the field, so to speak? And if that happened, tell us what that feeling was like for you when you knew that now you're going to put this training to effect.
Well, there were instances when I was really young and I was already going out. I mean, I must have been like 5 years old or something. I remember the people I were with were towering over me. And for me, like, I just didn't really have a grasp of what I was out there doing. I, it just didn't matter that much. I wasn't aware of where I was or what I was doing, and I just didn't care. And it it was I don't know. I was just what I was doing when I was younger was I was following around with some of the other people, and we were out doing scouting. Basically, we were scouting other timelines. We were scouting into the past. One of the places was World War II, and the gentleman I was with, he was a German, and we were in Germany, and there was bombed out like just buildings, rubble everywhere. And this particular area that we're in, it wasn't some action-packed scene with explosions and troops running around everywhere, but I guess they already came and went.
Yeah.
And so we were walking along, and like the thing about when you're young and you're a kid is that you tend to notice things that adults just kind of overlook. So you're a little more like sharper and perceptive and stuff like that. And as we were walking along, I saw a grenade on the ground, and I was like, "Oh crap! We gotta go take cover." So we take cover and we duck down for a little while, and nothing happened. So we waited there a couple minutes, and then we went back, and the grenade still didn't even blow up. And the guy, he said, I didn't even notice that thing. I didn't even see it there, but it was a dud. So but if it wasn't, there was a chance that he might not we could have got killed or something.
Yeah.
To that effect.
So you're talking about actual time travel, not just going back to the scene of an old battlefield.
Oh yeah, actual time travel.
Yeah.
We went all over the place. We went. I remember we called it the Wild West. It was basically 1800s, in the cowboy days. We went all the way back to the dinosaur era. Back then we traveled in it was a time machine. It flew. I didn't see the outside of it back then. And I remember seeing like this huge mosquito. It hit the window as soon as we arrived. It was just like bonk. And it's just, whoa, what the heck?
Yeah.
And and some of the Foo Fighters during World War II, some people have suspected that those were time machines for a while now. And well, I can say that they're right, because I was in one of them while we were out there, and we were looking out across the field. You could see planes flying in formation. Again, it wasn't some huge action-packed scene like you'd see in a movie. You could just, all you saw was a line of planes flying, and they weren't really doing a whole lot. There wasn't like dogfights or anything like that. We looked down, and you could see a tank on the ground, and it started taking pop shots at us. And it didn't hit us, but I mean, like, after a while it just stopped. And this other person that was with me was like, well, he probably just wanted to save ammo, or just trying to see what would happen if he actually hit us or something like that. And we've been to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and we would travel. I traveled to the future, but back then it was the future I'd traveled to was our past, basically, and our present. So, I mean, if you wanted me to tell you who won the Super Bowl or from the future, so you play some bets or something, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Now,
But
inevitably, the skeptics are going to say, okay, come on, time travel. We're going to listen to some of the other stuff you've been talking about, but now the time travel, we're a little skeptical about this. What is your response to those skeptics?
Well, all I can really say is, I mean, right now as we speak, it's not like I can just whip out a time machine and just start, showing people.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say, all I can say is that our current understanding of physics is like the way that a chimpanzee would use a stick to eat termites from an ant or a termite mound. You can't travel through time with a stick, basically. So our current understanding is not how it's incomplete. It's not really how it works. And apparently, like, this stuff gets leaked out in the future, supposedly. I don't know. And furthermore, there are other whistleblowers, so to speak, who are involved in similar projects involving the time travel that have all had these vast experiences. One of them was Andrew Bashago. He had been doing it when he was a kid as well, and his experiences seem to have went up to the 70s or something like that, late 70s, and then from my time, I was mostly in the 80s and 90s. So it's like from my time, it was like it kind of picked up off of that.
We will continue with our guest tonight. His name is Jason Brown, talking about his experiences working with the Men in Black, secret government agency. He's talked about training. He's talked about time travel, many other topics coming up. We will continue with Jason Brown on a late Wednesday night right here on Beyond Reality Radio. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio, late night Wednesday. Our guest is Jason Brown, talking about his experiences with the Men in Black. Jason, we have less than a minute before our break at the top of the hour. You do have a book out, Just an Urban Legend, True Stories from the Real Men in Black. For anybody that would like to purchase the book, what's the best way for them to do so?
That would be Amazon.com at the current time.
So go to Amazon.com. Again, the book is Just an Urban Legend, True Stories from the Real Men in Black. I'm someone that has written books on totally different subject matter, so I always have respect for people that are authors. How long did it take you to put this book together?
About a year or so.
Yeah. You happy with the way it came out?
It could have been better, but I mean, hey, I was working with what I had.
Yeah, a very honest author. That's a good answer. So, Jason, we're going to ask you to hold on. We have our break at the top of the hour, but we will continue. We'll also be taking our listener phone calls as well, 844-687-7669. Our number, 844-687-7669. Stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio, back with Jason Brown as we continue on a Wednesday night. We continue on a late Wednesday night. Jason and JV have the night off. Bruce Markison is my name, and I'm happy to be filling in on tonight's edition of Beyond Reality Radio. Our guest is Jason Brown, talking about his experiences working as an agent for the Men in Black. We're not talking about the film. We're talking about the secretive government agency, which has supposedly been around since the Roswell incident back in the late 1940s. We've been talking about Jason and his training with MIB. We've also talked about the concept of time travel. And as we pick up on that topic, Jason, I want to ask you about some of your work. On the notes that I have, we obviously research each guest and prepare for each show. And one of the notes that we have is that some of your work in time travel has actually been involving escorting VIPs through time. Can you explain exactly what you mean by that?
Yeah, it was basically, some of it was like bodyguarding duty. They would be out doing something or whatever. Forgive my vagueness. I can't get into too much detail, but basically what it was is sort of bodyguarding them, protecting them. Like, we'd get wind of something, some kind of event or somebody coming after them or whatever, and I would just kind of hang around and observe or just be in the area in order to keep them safe, basically.
Yeah.
And other kind of stuff that we did was...
when you say VIPs, are these really famous people that listeners would recognize?
Yep.
Yeah. But you can't say their names?
Nope. Not at this time. Sorry.
No. Even ones that are deceased?
Deceased, yes. One of them was Marilyn Monroe.
Really?
Yes. Basically, what happened to her, supposedly, at least from what I've been told, is that she didn't actually die. And what happened was her body was switched out and she basically faked her death or something like that. And it had to do with her knowing about government secrets or something like that, and basically that she had gone underground because of what she knew, basically. So there have been other people I've met that were deceased. These weren't necessarily the bodyguarding or the escorting. One of them was Abraham Lincoln. The other was Nikola Tesla. And that's probably about all I can mention right now.
Yeah. So you actually interacted with them in some way?
Yes. Abraham Lincoln, it was a brief interaction. Basically, I was just there, and everybody else did the talking. And the thing about him was, like, I mean, I was really young when I had met him, and I was expecting, like, the tallest guy I had ever seen in my life at that point to have this big, huge, booming voice, but he didn't. I mean, it was just, like, mind-boggling for me at the time. And the thing about him is he was just really soft spoken, and he was just extraordinarily, he seemed like he was extraordinarily polite. And I think back on it now, and I was just thinking that maybe he wasn't really extraordinarily polite. It's just that people in our present day are just a little rough around the edges or something like that.
Right. You mentioned also the inventor, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah. What happened was they brought me back to spend the day with the guy. I mean, it was just weird. I had no idea who he was at the time. And I mean, basically what happened was I hung around his lab, and we tinkered with some gadgets, and I was helping him out like a little helper or something for the day. And we built what happened was we built this tiny little, like, machine thing together. Like, I don't know how it worked. I was just following along as he built it. But basically what it was is he said it had a wheel. It was a device, and it had a wheel on it, and you flip a switch and the wheel keeps turning. And what he told me was that it will keep turning until the parts wear out, basically. So I mean, I don't know if it was perpetual motion or some kind of free energy device or whatever, but that's what we did. And I saw some of the other projects he had been working on. He took down this little, like, there's a shelf, and he took down this, it was like a disc or something like that, and he set it on the ground, and it levitated to about waist height.
Yeah.
So it was some kind of anti-gravity device or something like that. And the other thing that he had, it looked like a ball, and it had these copper wrappings like all around it in this strange configuration. And we nicknamed it the Bliss Machine, because I don't know what to make of this, but you hold it, and you just get this really good feeling that just flows through your whole body. And as soon as you let go, it just goes away. And you don't have any kind of, like, after effects. It's not like a drug. There's no come down or anything, and you don't feel the need to, like, keep holding on to it. But you just grab it, you feel it, and you let go, and you're fine. And from that point, we had lunch, and then we played some billiards. And I mean, I was a kid, and I'm terrible at billiards as it is, but he mopped the floor with me. Long story short.
Yeah.
And then we played some cards, and like I had no idea what winning hands were at that age. I mean, I'm not a gambler either. I still don't, barely. But what I learned from that interaction was I learned how to bluff. And what happened was I would just keep bluffing when I was playing with him, and he would check my cards afterwards, and he would look at them, and I would have won a lot more games than I did if I'd have known what hands were winning hands. And he still beat me, but I mean, I fared a little better there. But he said that I was extraordinarily lucky, and he just kept looking at the hands, and he kept saying that the odds of me having all those winning hands at that time were just astronomical. So I don't know what that was about. It's just a lucky game, I guess.
Now,
But,
when you interacted with these celebrities, these VIPs, how did they react to you? Did they say, I mean, who are you? What is your purpose here? What was that interaction like?
Okay. Before these kind of people go out, you have to go through, like, a training course, basically. So what this means, long story short, is that they already know the situation, and they already know what's going on. So, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure they thought it was kind of weird or whatever, but they didn't really mention it. And so you can't just be some like, rich person off the street and want to just go, take a trip through time or something like that. You have to be physically and mentally capable, because when you travel back in time, you can't bring any ID with you. You can't bring any money with you. And basically, this opens up a lot of possibilities to being arrested, because if you don't have ID on you and you're back in, like, say, the Cold War era or something like that, that you would, if you got arrested, they're going to sit there wondering who the heck are you?
Yeah.
Why is there no record of you or something like that? So they would have to know how to get out of the back of a cop car, even if they're handcuffed, kind of thing. So there's some training involved even for them before they can even go. So
Yeah.
they weren't exactly new to the whole thing, because it's kind of, there's a little leeway for interaction in the environment if you happen to be in an area and bump into somebody or make somebody precisely 1 second late for their appointment or whatever. It's not going to break the universe or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's you still have to be careful, and if something happens, we'll just probably disavow all knowledge of you and end up bottomized in a mental institution or something, and nobody will believe you.
Jason, when you see movies like The Time Machine, Time After Time, that explore this whole idea of time travel, are they accurate in any way to the experiences that you have had, or are they just way off?
Well, I would have to say no, not really, because when you're making a movie, you have to make it a little more exciting. You have to there's all these conditions that need to be met. And when I was traveling through time, there wasn't a bunch of prerequisites that were required. Basically, it wasn't like the Terminator movies where you have to strip down naked and then you're allowed to go or whatever. What we had was, by the time that I was involved, they had miniaturized it to the point where it was a portable device. This device could be placed inside of like a car, a bus, an airplane, anything like that. I mean, you probably couldn't lug it around in a backpack, but I mean, you could drive around with it. And it opens up, I call it a time tunnel or a time gateway, and I'm guessing is like a wormhole, and it just opens up, you go through, and you're there, and that's it. There's no, like, strange sensations. There's I've heard of people not being able to bring any metal through or anything like that, but I mean, it was fine. You could just drive on through and you're there, or walk through, and that was it. And it was just easy. I mean,
so it was not physically exhausting in any way?
No. Like I said, you just go through, you're there, that's it, and you just do your thing and come back.
We will continue with Jason Brown. Interesting discussion about his time working with the Men in Black, the training, rigorous training, harrowing at some points in time. And also we'll, of course, continue the topic of time travel. We do want to take your calls a little bit later on in our second hour. Our toll-free number is 844-687-7669. Again, that number, 844-687-7669. If you'd like to jump on the phone lines, we will be taking your calls in our final half hour. We will continue with Jason Brown discussing his experience with the government agency Men in Black. Stay with us. This is Beyond Reality Radio. This is Beyond Reality Radio, late night Wednesday. Bruce Marcuson filling in for Jason and JV. They have the night off. Our guest is Jason Brown. He has been telling us about his work for the Men in Black. Jason, I understand that you did have an experience where you were actually called upon to investigate a UFO sighting. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this took place when I was really small. And what happened was, me and two other girls that were in the same program, we took a van out to an Air Force base, and basically the report that they got was that there was a UFO. It was almond shaped, and it was just kind of hanging out over the ocean out in the Pacific. And I mean, we the van that we were in was just, it was unremarkable. It was this ugly burgundy color with those weird little like sparkly gold flecks in the paint. I mean, from what I understand, the purpose of this was so that it was more low key instead of having some kind of, you know, big old like caravan of Humvees or whatever coming through. And so we show up to this Air Force base, and you know, I'm walking by and I see this F-14 Tomcat, and that was one of my favorite planes when I was a kid, and I was like, hey, I want to fly that thing. And there's two other people that had brought us there. It was a man and a woman. They were both MIB, and they were partners. And the dude, he was wearing a bomber jacket, World War II style. The woman, she was wearing like a long black coat. It looked kind of like a business jacket kind of deal. And so they go, hey, you want to fly a Hawkeye instead? And I'm like, whoa, Hawkeye, you know, that sounds cool. You know, yeah, okay. So they pointed over to the Hawkeye, and it was like, instead of this, you know, fighter jet, it was this like twin turboprop, lame looking, you know, aircraft that was built in the 50s. And so we go up to it, and there was 6 people waiting next to it. 4 of them were in woodland camo fatigues, 2 men and 2 women. And then there was 2 others there. One was wearing what looked like a Russian officer's uniform. And this took place in the 80s, so this was still during the Cold War, so it was kind of a strange situation there. And the other guy that was with him, he was in full Marine Corps dress blues for some reason. And so we all get on the plane, and one of the women that was in the woodland camo fatigues, she was on the radio. She was using the radio equipment. This particular E2 Hawkeye, it had been modified with extra equipment. There was like a multi-spectrum radio detection. It had the radar was modified apparently to be able to detect, I guess, different aircraft that you wouldn't normally be able to detect. Like it was all fine-tuned for like UFOs basically. And apparently it had even had microphones on the outside. There was I was told it was a repurposed laser designator, and what it was used for was for like scanning the 3D like surface area of an object basically. And I mean, I don't know why they had me doing this. I was just a kid, but I had been through all kinds of like virtual reality and training and flight simulators, and so they had me flying this thing. And the man in the bomber jacket, he was right there watching over me, you know, advising me and stuff like that. And basically, I was flying by instrument because I was so small I couldn't even see out the front window yet. And so we take off and we head out into the ocean towards where the object was last reported. And I stand up on the seat so we can see it, and the other girls are there looking out at it. And what it looked like, it was this silver craft, and it looked exactly like the ship from Flight of the Navigator from that movie. And I remember the other 2 girls that were there that were with me, they're like, whoa, look, it's real, because we had all seen that movie before. And basically, from what I was told, the purpose of those 2 girls that were with us is that they were psychically sensitive.
Yeah.
And one of them was supposed to detect danger or something like that. So I guess it was like having more like sensor equipment on board, I guess you could say. And so what I was told to do was you would fly towards the craft in a circular motion.
Yeah. Jason, we're going to have to stop right there just because we have a break coming up, but we will finish off the story about this UFO investigation. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. Stay with us. You're listening to Beyond Reality Radio. Jason and JV have the night off. Bruce Markison filling in. We will continue for about 25 more minutes. Our guest is Jason Brown talking about his experiences with MIB, the Men in Black. Jason, before the break, you were talking about your investigation of the UFO. You went up in the aircraft. These 2 young ladies are there with you because of their, I guess, psychic abilities. Were they able to communicate with anyone in this UFO?
Not that I'm aware of. Basically, just from what I understand, is that they were only there to detect danger, so that we'd be able, so that we know to basically get out of there. And all one of them said was that there was no danger, and that there were people, and they were just looking around, and that's all I know. But the thing about that is that in the Men in Black, when we use the term people, we don't necessarily mean human. We pretty much call anyone who's refer to anyone who's even an alien. They're a person, basically, like you and me. They're not just, you know, just, it's not just a term you just throw around.
Yeah.
So what we didn't actually find out if they were actually alien or not. But as far as we found out, they were just looking around, and they meant no harm, basically. And
how close do you get to this UFO?
Pretty close. I was told you fly around in a circle, and each circle you get closer and closer, because they said that we didn't want to spook it away, like we didn't want to act too aggressively towards them, because we didn't know what was going on with them. And we got close enough. They had microphones on the outside of the Hawkeye, so they wanted to get close. They wanted to detect the radio frequencies, if applicable, and they wanted to see if they could pick up sound from it too. And the other thing was, on this Hawkeye, they had these canisters under each wing. They looked like these big aluminum canisters, and basically what it had inside was like this blaze orange paint. And what it was for, and what we did was we flew over the craft, and that paint, that it would spray out behind it as you were flying over. And the purpose of that was in case like UFOs were able to cloak, like invisibly to the eye. So we flew over it and we sprayed it, and then we came back around again and we saw it sitting there, and then all of a sudden, just boom, it was gone, just lightning quick, and that was it.
Disappeared without a trace.
Yep, just zoom, took off. And there was actually a second instance of a similar looking craft, and this time it actually fired at us, and it didn't hit us, but we just got out of there, and then that was it. We're like, yeah, we don't want none, because this E2 Hawkeye, I mean, it was completely unarmed. It was a reconnaissance aircraft.
Right.
All it had was radar, radio detection, and the laser designator. There was 0 weapons whatsoever on board. So that was it. We got out of there.
We are taking your calls for Jason Brown. Our number is 844-687-7669. Again, 844-687-7669. And let's go to our first caller of the night. We have Michelle, who is on the line with us from the state of Georgia. Michelle, welcome. You're on Beyond Reality Radio with Jason Brown.
Hi, Jason. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I was wondering, I was going to ask about the time travel here. I was really interested. I was wondering if you ever experienced the time travel. I think I heard you said you did. But, how far did you actually travel back in time?
The furthest back that I recall actually traveling back was basically the dinosaur era. That's about as far as I could tell. And there were different points between then. The next one up, I recall, is ancient Egypt. And what I saw was we're up high in a ship, and all I could see was, from a distance, the pyramids, and they looked brand new. They were just completely smooth edges, and there was foliage and vegetation. It wasn't looking like a desert back then. And then the next point up from that was the 1800s or so, and then it just goes like 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s.
Why did they pick such young kids for the study? I mean, were there other young kids like your age that was with you in the study?
Yes. Yeah. There's quite a few, actually. I had a team. It was me and it was 4 other girls. And there were others. There was previous projects before this one. And the idea of picking kids at such a young age is that you would start the training from birth, basically, so that you would have a higher level of training by the time you're older, as opposed to just somebody who joined the military at 18 and only had about a year or so of training. So that was the idea behind it, is they wanted to start young and build you up from a younger age.
Okay. Did you guys ever change anything, like when you went back in your travels and time?
We did. I can't talk about too much of it, but what I can tell you is that what happened is, in our present, a lot of the changes had already taken place, and what we were doing is we were going back and we were preserving that. So I guess it was like we had gone back and we changed it, but the change was already here in our present. So we're just,
Was it for the better, or?
Yeah, it was for the better. I mean, see, these time travel projects have been going on for since probably the Philadelphia experiment. I mean, we're talking like almost 70 years. And people have always been saying like we're on the brink of World War III, like constantly. They were saying that back during the Cold War. Then the Iraq War started, and then people are saying 2012 and all the kinds of stuff. And we haven't all died in a nuclear apocalypse. So I would say like whatever we were doing, it turned out for the better.
Michelle, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on Beyond Reality Radio. Jason, I'm curious, kind of as a follow-up to what Michelle was talking about with your time travel experiences, of all the different eras that you went back to in the past, was there one in particular that you said, hey, I would have liked to have lived in this time period? Was there one specific time that kind of really intrigued you more than another?
I would have to say no, not really, because when I was traveling back in the, we'll say like the 70s, this is one that I remember in particular because we were on a bus, basically. It was camouflaged to look like a regular public transit back then. And as soon as we stepped out the bus, like I started getting a headache because of all of the air pollution. And back then, they didn't have the catalytic converters on the cars yet. So we were in the city, and you have all these big old gas guzzling cars driving around, just polluting the place like nobody's business. And it was just, I was just completely unimpressed. I wanted to go home, and I was just like, no. And in my present day now, when I look back and I think, hey, maybe I want to take a trip to the 80s or something, but you think about it, it's like nostalgia is better than the real thing. You kind of romanticize these times, and so you want to check it out, but as far as actually living there, it would just be boring because there's no internet back then. The TV sucks. I mean, there's not much to do.
Yeah,
So,
we forget about the advances that have been made and the modern conveniences that we have today that were not there 40 or 50 years ago.
Exactly. I mean, people these days, they say, oh, I wished I lived in the medieval times or like, the Conan the Barbarian days or whatever. And it's like, but you don't really think about the little things, like the toilet paper, like just having a nice regular hot shower.
Yeah.
I mean, and some of the times I was told that you have to be careful what you even eat back then because it can make your stomach upset and you can spend the whole day on the freaking toilet for a while because there's a lot of little subtleties that you don't even think about back then.
Let's go back to the phone lines. We have Rick. He is on the line from North Carolina. Rick, you're on Beyond Reality Radio with Jason Brown.
Hey, thank you. I just want to ask the guy one thing. What about fallen angels and God? Where does that come in at?
Is that something you're familiar with, Jason? Fallen angels and God?
Yeah, because
I would have to say that's beyond my expertise. All I know is just the stuff that I read on the internet. I can't say I've actually met a God or a fallen angel, so that wasn't really my primary focus of what I've been doing.
But I mean, do you deny that they exist?
What's your feeling, Jason? Are you a spiritual person in any way? Do you believe in God?
Well, no, I mean, he's talking about the aliens and all that, but I know reality of one thing, and I'm not saying that I'm being spiritual about it. I'm saying that I know for sure because I've experienced these things. And where does the fallen angels come in at? Or most people would call them demons. Where do they come in at? How come? Why? I mean, I know you're saying aliens is one thing. I've never seen aliens, but I do know that demons or fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, I do know for a fact that they exist. I mean, does the government have any, or what he's talking about, is there any part of this in with that besides the aliens?
Jason, any experience that you've had with demons, evil spirits, that kind of thing?
I would have to say that it's just beyond my expertise. We didn't encounter any that I'm aware of. We just didn't. It didn't involve the work that we were doing. So there's not much I can really say about that.
Rick, we thank you for the call. Thanks for being with us on Beyond Reality Radio. A couple of other topics I wanted to broach with you, Jason. Tell us a little bit about GhostNet and also Project Looking Glass. Tell us about those items.
Now I think this is pretty interesting. What GhostNet and Looking Glass was, well, here's what the GhostNet is. Let me start with that. The GhostNet is a global espionage network. It was for hiding communications. And what it does is it's the internet, and it's beamed, it travels through time. It's like another form of time travel. Only with this, instead of physical time travel, it's just a radio signal that is beamed out into space, and it's just, binary code, ones and zeros. It's a lot safer, and it's a lot cheaper to do it this way than actual physical time travel. And what they do is they beam the signal out into space where the Earth should have been at that point in time, because the solar system is traveling around the galaxy at around 514,000 miles per hour. And the Earth is going around the sun at about 67,000 miles per hour. So what this means is that the Earth is not in the same place it was 5 seconds ago, let alone 5 years ago. And basically, then here's where Looking Glass comes into play. I've heard various things about Looking Glass from other whistleblowers and whatnot. They're saying it's alien technology, and I've heard of the chronovisor that Andrew Bashago talked about. And what I was working with was it was a little different. It was along the same lines as the internet being transmitted through time. And I think I'm not trying to contradict the others of what they were saying. What I think was going on was that it was a different aspect of the same project that was investigating different methods of achieving the same result, which was looking into the future.
Yeah.
And what Looking Glass was, from my perspective, it was an archive of the internet that was sent back through time to about the 80s or so. It was just a massive archive. And supposedly it had stuff from the 2020s and beyond. And what you would do is it's on a server on the military, and when you log on, it starts with a page, and it says that if you come on there without authorization, then your life is basically forfeit. You have to check a box and click I read and understand, and as soon as it comes up, it's just all you see is a Google page. So if you don't know what it is you're looking at, then you might just click away from it. But all you can do from that point is you have to run a search of what you're looking for specifically. And there's all kinds of news articles and whatnot that come from the future, basically. And that's what one of the things the government had been investigating and experimenting with is just sending information itself through time as opposed to physical time travel.
This is no longer an active project? This was something that was done in the past?
No, my version of the Looking Glass that I'm speaking of is a current project. It's currently active. Yeah, and so is the GhostNet. It's used by spies and stuff like that. And the idea of the GhostNet, of sending information through time, was that if you were to communicate in this manner, your operative could be out of the area by years or even decades, because in case somebody tried to trace the signal and the location or whatever, so that it was a lot more secure that way, because it scrambled the reference of time to where they could be long gone, by years possibly.
Yeah. And these are projects that you're involved with.
Yeah.
You are. Okay.
I had some hands-on experience with this stuff.
Well, Jason, we want to thank you very much for joining us over the last 2 hours. Again, the website is theneoilluminati.com. Also, Jason has a Facebook page. Go to facebook.com and then type in the Neo Illuminati Official. He has also written the book, Just an Urban Legend, True Stories from the Real Men in Black. Jason, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Jason Brown talking about his experiences with MIB, the Men in Black. We appreciate his time. We'll get set to wrap up tonight's show in just a moment. You are listening to Beyond Reality Radio. Wrapping up a Wednesday night show on Beyond Reality Radio. Again, our thanks to Jason Brown joining us for the last 2 hours to talk about his involvement with the Men in Black. Bruce Markison filling in tonight for our two regular hosts. Jason and JV both have the night off, but they will be back for the Thursday night show. And on Thursday, their guest will be Todd Standing. He is the Sasquatch researcher. So they'll be talking about interesting research on Bigfoot. Always a favorite topic of mine, and looking forward to that program tomorrow. On Monday, the guest will be Lee Austin, writer and author. He'll be discussing his book, Morning Star's Tale, why the flat earth topic is so controversial, and also how the occult and the Book of Enoch confirm many of the theories in the book. And then on Tuesday's program, Jason and JV will be talking to Rob Shelsky. He is a ufologist and paranormal expert. We'll be discussing his latest book, Shattered Reality, The Mandela Effect. Also what he is currently working on, a new book concerning life after death, consciousness, and quantum immortality. So that's coming up over the next several nights right here on Beyond Reality Radio. There's lots of ways that you can follow our show. Again, our website is beyondrealityradio.com. We have a chat room at the website as well. You can join us on Facebook at Beyond Reality Radio, and also Snapchat and Instagram. And if you'd like to check